Maximum sustained wind 65 miles per hour. The key stat on this graphic now is the movement. It is now north at 5 miles per hour. It was north-northwest. We expected that movement to turn toward the north. That has already happened. And then we're going to be looking to a north and northeast movement over the next 24 to 36 hours. Joining me right now is AccuWeather Chief Meteorologist Jonathan Porter. You know, John, this has been such a very unusual hurricane season. This time of the year, we're looking for these long track hurricanes that form way out in the Atlantic, and you have days and days to track. But this is not what has happened to Francine. It was more of a homegrown situation here as it formed yesterday. And it was strengthening, but it just goes to show you how perfect you need conditions for intensification, because there was just a little bit of dry air that came into the storm center.
Oh, just the conditions have to be perfect, just like a great play in a sports, in any type of a sporting event. All the conditions have to come together just right for that play to happen. Same thing with when we're dealing with the atmosphere and to get an intensifying and especially rapidly intensifying tropical storm or hurricane. So the intensification process, though, is starting. We could see a improved presentation here on the satellite loop, and as it continues to traverse very warm water that is primed for hurricane or tropical storm and hurricane development, we're expecting this will become a more intense storm.
You know, John, let's take a look at the water temperatures. I mean, they're plenty warm enough. They're in the middle 30s, but we have another product, John, that gives you a little more extra information. It's called the ocean heat content. And what it does is it looks at the depth of the warm water. So how warm it is how deep the warm water is, and it gives you a number. And explain to our viewers how impressive this number is.
Well, it's extremely high when you look at the long-term historic average, in fact, record high in terms of that ocean heat content. And look at it's that red line on this graphic, and you can see that it's well above the blue line, which is the long-term average, and there's no lines above it. So that means 2024 is the highest ocean heat content for the Gulf of Mexico when it's averaged across the entire Gulf. So this is, again, why we've been talking about the warm water and how that can be a significant impact to intensify a storm, which of course means greater wind, storm surge, and other impacts from the storm.
3 ingredients, John, for formation: warm water, sufficient moisture. We think we're going to get that second one later today.
Yep.
Let's talk about the wind shear.
That's always another factor that we're looking at. And again, when we are considering wind shear, we're talking about wind shear is when you have changing wind speed and direction as you go up through the atmosphere. And when you have wind shear present in the atmosphere, that can slow the intensification or prevent the intensification of a tropical storm or hurricane. So for a storm to develop, and especially rapidly develop, it needs to be in an area of low wind shear. And what do we have? Low wind shear right near the storm. So this is a favorable environment. But Bernie, as the storm continues to lift to the north, the shear is going to increase a bit. And that's one of the factors we've been looking at.
But as you and I were talking about, here is what makes this difficult. You look at the purple. Once you get across the upper Texas coast, Louisiana, yes, the wind shear is increasing, but it's more than just the wind shear. It's the direction pertaining along with how it relates to the movement of Francine, and it's going to be steered to the northeast, and the wind shear is coming in out of the west-southwest, John. So I've been talking about this morning. It's almost like when you take a walk in the evening and you have a gusty wind. Is the wind coming at you or at your back? And if it's at your back, it's not as detrimental?
Right, you don't notice it as much, right? It's not as problematic when you've got a wind at your back versus a cool wind right in your face. That's a great analogy. And so the storm is going to have that wind at its back because it's going to be moving to the north and east as it's guided by that jet stream disturbance. And so that shear is going to be along the track of the storm. So that means that we think it's going to have less of an impact in terms of reducing the wind intensity. And Bernie, this can be intensifying all the way until it gets to the coast, which of course can prolong impacts and will shift a little bit further to the east. That could mean bigger power outage and wind issues, as well as storm surge in the New Orleans metro.
So, John, you and I were just talking about this. You know, we were talking about what's the probability. We have a Category 2. hurricane at landfall, 96 to 100 miles per hour. What's the probability that it becomes a Category 3? It's interesting. In my mind, it's about 30%, and you were thinking about 20%, 15 to 20.
Yeah, I was thinking 15 to 20, right. So we can't rule it out, and that's why we want people to be prepared for a higher impact storm along the Louisiana coastline right up into Baton Rouge, New Orleans, again, where if the wind speed is higher, there will be more power outage concerns, and that could be a significant issue there. So make sure you have plenty of supplies in those areas in case you lose power. Could be for days in some areas.
The other concern we have, John, we have that big upper high across the Midwest. And that means as Francine loses wind intensity as we get into Wednesday, that high may block that system from moving. And that's a concern for a stalling either tropical depression or tropical rainstorm Thursday into Friday across western Tennessee and eastern Arkansas.
That's an excellent point. Our team of over 100 expert meteorologists and hurricane experts were just discussing that. That is actually going to be like a traffic jam in the atmosphere. It's going to slow the motion of the storm way down. And when that happens, you get persistent downpours over the same areas. So please, all the way up the Mississippi Valley, don't let your guard down. This can become a very serious flooding concern in some of those areas as well. So impacts at the coast and far inland. Download the AccuWeather app. We've got all this on great interactive maps so you can understand the impact in your community and around the area.